There we go. Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. This is Dee with Unplugged Grief Ministries podcast. You may be noticing that you're not seeing my face at this moment because my so-called new camera decided not to cooperate, and we know last week it was. So I think it's my laptop. I really do think it's my computer because it originally was saying that Internet Explorer or something couldn't. And I'm not on Explorer, so that's stupid. Anyway, I'll get it working somehow later. Um, so today we have Nesreen Ahmed here um, of Harbor Lights Coaching, and she's coming to us to share not only her story, but she's coming to share and teach us also what we. I know I'm a sibling. I have five brothers and sisters, and thankfully I have not lost any sibling. And I know you mentioned a few minutes ago that you lost your sister, and for me, I don't know what I would do if I lost one of my siblings. I love each one of my brothers and sisters very much, even if at times I just don't want to talk to them or they don't want to talk to me. But that, and that's what I hate the most because we don't know when a loss is going to happen. Life is given to us a gift on each day. We don't know if we are promised tonight, much less tomorrow morning. And um, for me, I believe that God gives us the breath of life as a gift every single day. And it is our job on every day to honor Him in what we do in our day's life. But sometimes we never know when our lives come to an end. It may be an illness or disease. It may be from a car accident. And on Saturday, as I was studying the cultures of the different people who have died, and some people have been murdered. There was one couple I Nazreen I saw the other day, a husband and wife, a mother and father, killed instantly in a car crash where a truck fell over and crushed them. Three children left without parents. But I saw how the siblings of the of the brother Christian and the sister, um, my mind just went blank on her name, Teresa, how the siblings reacted to the loss of their brother and their sister, the husband and wife. And then I also watched how the children, these children like 7, 5, 3 years old, they're very little. But still, to watch how the siblings, the children of this couple, how they also responded to the loss of their parents. And we know children at that age, not all have a total comprehension of what death or loss might be, you know. Um, and we really don't want them to know, but I think it's smart compared to what it used to be 50 years ago. They weren't even allowed in funeral homes like they are now. And I think for many people, your sibling, was it just you and your sister that grew up together, or did you have other siblings?
I actually have two sisters. I'm the youngest of three, and it was my middle sister that passed
So
away.
you and your siblings, you and your sisters were very close. Like in some instances, some people, they have a sister who may be like their best friend.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to them every day, you cry with them, you laugh with them. They're like your best. Well, for many, it is their best friend. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I wish it was like that with me and my sisters. And
Mm-hmm.
but I still
Yeah,
don't. I still wish them well. I don't wish anything upon them.
of course, of
So
course.
share your story real quick and teach us something real quick. because I know you have you're tight in time, so
Mm-hmm.
that we can understand this a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and mute myself, and I'll try my best not to interrupt you.
No problem.
But
No problem.
I think it's so important that we all learn how to react. How do we react? And how should we react? Everybody's different, and we all
Mm-hmm.
grieve differently. The way you grieve for your sister may not be the same way you grieved for with your other sister. She may grieve differently than what you grieved,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
the blood is still there. The relationship is still there, and you still share the same loss.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I'm anxious to learn from you, and I hope there are others here who will also want to learn from you how we as siblings, as you a sister, I'm a sister, some of them may just be a brother. How do we? I'm trying to find the right words for this. How do we cope with this kind of a loss? Because
Yeah.
it's I've heard, and I may be wrong. I just have heard that for some people, losing a sibling is like a parent's losing children. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how true that is. I know what it's like to lose a son, but I don't know what it's like to lose a sibling.
Mm-hmm.
So share with us with your story and what you've learned and how you can help many of us who may have lost a sibling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me here, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. I don't always get to talk about my sister as often as I would like. So, um, yeah, so my sister, she actually passed away almost 10 years ago, which like blows my mind every time. Like this year, when I've been saying that, it kind of blows my mind because I'm just like, how has it been 10 years? And how has it only been 10 years? It feels like it was a lifetime. But and it's funny, like we didn't always have the best relationship. Like you're mentioning, you wish your relationship with your sisters was a little different. I definitely for a long time wished my relationship with my sister was different. So growing up we had our ups and downs, but when I was very young, she was like my hero. She was the person I wanted to be. She was like my favorite sister, my favorite in the family, and I would copy everything she did to the point where it just drove her crazy, actually. Um, and we had our tough times where I felt like maybe she wasn't there for me as much as I wanted her to be, or vice versa. Maybe I wasn't there for her as much as much as she wanted me to be. But um, I guess it was about 2012 where I'd been living in New York for about 10 years. And I was like, you know what, it's time for me to move on and try something new for a little while. So I moved out to California. Actually, I was living out in San Francisco. And she came out to San Francisco on business. Uh, and so we got to spend some time together. We had some really nice conversations. And so at that point, it felt like things were really starting to go well in our relationship, and there was a lot of reconnecting, and kind of recommitting to the relationship, and uh, yeah, and so that was like in 2012, and then in 2013 she came into the city for work, and she passed away suddenly. Like I literally got a phone call from her friend, a coworker, on a Saturday afternoon while I was working. And it was just one of those things in your life where you're like, that's like a moment you never forget, right? That's a moment that changes your life forever. And for me, it was like everything was upside down. I was very lucky at that point. I had not lost anybody else in my immediate family, and I hadn't really gone through that much loss. I mean, or deaths. I hadn't gone through that many deaths in my life at that point. And so I had no idea how to handle it, especially when somebody was taken away so young and so suddenly. For me, it was just like it was like months before I could even comprehend what was actually happening. And I remember even the first few weeks after she died, like I woke up and I was like almost surprised to be alive. You were saying earlier, like it's a gift. Life is a gift every single day. And at that point, it really was like the first time in my life where I experienced such a sudden loss, where it was like, oh, this could end. This, like, life could end at any point, you know. And those first few weeks, I was really like, oh, I'm waking up today. I'm alive today, you know. And yeah, I had a lot of guilt. I had a lot of regret. I had a lot of pain. Um, just missing her, you know, not wanting this to happen, wanting her to be alive. And um, I decided to move back to New York. So I'd only lived in California for a few years, and I decided I wanted to live closer to home. Like my family was on the East Coast. A lot of my friends and colleagues were in the city, so it just made more sense to come back to New York. So I moved back and started trying to figure out what to do and where to go and how to live. And I started working in my old career that I wasn't happy in, but I just needed some stability and something to like keep me grounded and pay the bills. And started looking for help. You know, I started with therapy. Saw a therapist who was lovely, but not really trained in grief, and or at least trained in the way that I felt like I needed. And so it really wasn't a good fit overall, unfortunately. But I also went to support groups and found some help there as well. But it wasn't until, kind of fast forward, it wasn't until I ended up going into coaching as a profession. Like, I was in a professional coaching training program. And that's when I found out about grief coaching. And I worked with a grief coach, and we worked through the grief recovery method. That was sort of the main way that she worked with people. So I worked with her through that. And it was, for me, it was like nothing I ever imagined. I mean, not to say that it cured me or anything like that, because you never get over grief, but like, it really helped me work through a lot of the guilt and the regret that I was feeling about my sister, about the way our relationship went, and just helped me feel like I resolved a lot of things. So for me, it was really, really amazing. And I decided to go get trained, and so I went back to San Francisco to get trained in the grief recovery method, and kind of started to integrate grief work into my coaching practice. And so now, again, almost 10 years later, about 8 or 9 years of being a coach, I do a lot of work around grief. And some of it is with the grief recovery work. Some of it is through the training program with David Kessler. And some of it is just through my own experience and other training and courses I've taken and stuff like that. And, you know, I do believe sibling loss is a very unique loss. I mean, all loss is unique, and any type of loss is going to be different. You know, I don't know if it's the same to lose a child as it is to lose a sibling, but I know that there are very few people in your life that you will go from kind of the beginning of life to the end of life, or you're quote unquote supposed to go through the beginning to the end of your life with those people, right? You know that your parents are going to pass away. You know that you're going to pass away when you have kids, right? Like, but there's certain people you get married maybe late in life or early in life, but you know there's certain people that have just been there the whole time. And that's really what siblings are, right? They're the people. For some people, it might be cousins, stuff like that. But for most of us, I think it's our siblings who we're the closest to when we're younger. It's our siblings who we learn from and develop with, and you know, whether it's good or bad things that we develop, right, and learn. Those are the people. Those are kind of your core people through a good majority of your life. And so to lose somebody, especially when they're, you know, she was 37 when she died. So especially when they're young, and especially when it's unexpected, you know, it's very jarring. And the thing about sibling loss is that very often people forget about you, the griever, the sibling. And what I mean by that is I had a lot of people. I was actually pretty fortunate. Not too many people did this, but I had a lot of people ask me, you know, how are your parents doing? You know, how is, you know, so-and-so doing? Like, they kind of forgot about me and the fact that I lost my sister, and they were more, not necessarily more concerned, but they would ask more about other people in my family. And I know that's true for other people, especially if their sibling had kids, or if their sibling was married, you know, had a spouse. And so you kind of get lost sometimes forgotten along the way. And that can be really frustrating because it's like, you know, I lost somebody incredibly important to me, but you're going to ask about somebody else. You know, you're going to ask about my family member or, you know, that person's spouse or whatever it was. And so that can be very insulting and very hurtful at times. And if nothing else, you know, if there are people watching who have not gone through sibling loss and they know somebody who has, you know, be sure to ask about that person that's standing in front of you, that's grieving, that's hurting. Um, and if you have gone through sibling loss, you know, my heart is with you. And it's hard. It's hard when you face things like that, where it's like it's almost like your grief is less important or less focused on, less relevant as a result of the person asking. But I think those are, or that's at least one thing that can often happen. Um, and I think it's important to remember and recognize, you know, our people and our loved ones. I try to do various things to honor my sister, usually on her birthday. I'll make a donation in honor of her to her favorite charity and things like that. And I think there are things that we can do, especially when it comes to our siblings. I think there are things we can do um, to honor them, honor our relationship with them, our upbringing. You know what I mean? And I definitely feel like I learned a lot from my sister in terms of the kind of person I want to be. Um, and some of the things that I experienced in my childhood, I've let go of as a result of my grief, and really tried to heal some of the things that I experienced in a way, as a way to also honor her, and some of the things that she struggled with in her life. And I think there are ways that you can do that as a family as well. You know, I think my sister who's alive, she and I become much closer after we lost our sister. You know, we definitely talk a lot more. We talk about her quite a bit, you know, and the way that we were raised and some of the things that neither of us really understood until after she passed away. And so it definitely has brought us closer. So yeah, so I mean, I think there's a lot of different things you can do to kind of honor your person, and particularly again when it's a sibling, you know, so many of your childhood memories are kind of intertwined and wrapped around with that person, and so finding, even if it's small things, finding small ways to honor them, to remember them, to do the work for yourself to heal, whether it's from the grief or other things you might have experienced in your life. Do the work to heal as a way to honor them. Uh-oh. You can't tell. D, are you still here?
Mute myself. Because it's so easy to just want. You know, it's interesting that you said something that really got to me of what you emphasized that I think really, really, really we need to couple, back in April, I think it was, or March, I did a workshop on when children grieve. And I think we need to do a workshop on when adult children grieve, because you said something how a lot of time when at the time of your sister's passing or soon after, how family and friends were, you felt that family and friends were more concerned about your other sister and your parents, and they didn't approach you of understanding your loss, your grief. And it's like, how is it that you standing right in front of this lady who's the sister of the lost, and you're asking about everybody else, but you're not asking about how she's doing? Nesreen, how are you doing?
Mhm.
You know, they should have. You're right. Um, you are right about that. That many times people don't. They look right into your eyes and they don't. Are they afraid to ask you? Are they afraid they're going to say something? And then maybe they just don't know what to say. But it's like they were afraid to. I'm trying to find the right words to say this, but I think you know what I'm saying. Is like they.
Yeah.
It's like they. I don't think they didn't care.
No,
I think they just didn't know
I think it's a
what to say.
combination. Honestly, I think
Yeah,
it's a combination of things. I think they didn't know what to say to me. I think they felt awful, um, and they themselves, felt awful just in general, about what happened. But I think a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, a parent lost a child." Like, just like you were talking earlier about those two
yeah,
people who died in the car crash. Those children are without parents, right? And it's the same kind of thing where it's like, um, my mother and father lost their daughter, and that's so intense and so heartbreaking. And again, I'm not dismissing my own loss by any stretch, but like in their eyes, that is the harder, quote unquote, harder loss, or the more heartbreaking loss, right? And so I think culturally we have this idea of like one loss is going to be harder. So it's not as hard to lose your sister as it is if you lose your child, right?
yeah.
And so I think part of it was that too, was that they were just like, oh my God, your parents, how are your parents? And I appreciate that to a certain extent. Like I understand where they were coming from. And that, of course, I don't think they were trying to dismiss or ignore my loss. But it was just like, you're strong. They're not, right? You can handle this. They can't.
But they
That
don't
was,
really know that maybe you can handle it.
oh, I
Maybe
couldn't.
right
Right.
now you're just pretending to be strong because,
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
but one of the things I've learned recently of talking with other grief coaches is learning to, when you approach someone who's grieving, like for instance you at that time, the question should be always, how are you doing? You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
we know she's grieving, we know they're grieving, we know,
Hmm.
but how about you?
Yeah.
Because I think it really is important that we talk about when children grieve, but we don't talk about when adult children grieve.
Hmm.
Because although little children may show some signs and of their grief, but a lot of times people don't recognize the adult children or the adult siblings because they see you as this tall, strong person that they've always known you as, and then they think you're not grieving, but you
Hmm.
are grieving.
Hmm. Hmm.
One of the things I was telling you about when I was doing the research of the cultures, how many people were wearing sunglasses, even when in the church or the funeral home, whatever, wearing the sunglasses. And in the back of my head, I'm asking, why are they wearing sunglasses in the church? And it came to me instantly. Some people hide their, I may be wrong, hide their grief behind those sunglasses. Like they don't want people to know that they're crying.
Hmm.
And I always say, it's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to grieve. There's nothing to be ashamed of. And maybe it's the culture. I don't know, but I see a lot. It happen everywhere, no matter where it is. So, and I know everybody grieves differently, and everybody has a way of expressing their grief. But it's just a thought that enters my mind that you. That's good that you and your sister, your other sister. Well, I guess you still consider an older sister. Since you told me you were the youngest, that you two developed a close relationship with each other, and that you two keep in close contact with each other, because you realize when you lost that other sister how important each one of you meant to each other.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
unfortunately and sadly, it took the loss of one of you to realize that.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm very grateful for my relationship with my sister now. And I also, I mean, I personally took it, or one of the lessons I should say, I learned from losing my sister was how important it is for me to know that the people in my life know how much I love them, how important they are to me, how much I care, when I like that I'm there for them no matter what. And so I have really worked hard to develop and maintain relationships where my people know that I love them. They know how much I care. And if they need anything, if they want anything, if something's not working, whatever it is, that I'm there for them. And a lot of that is because I don't want to go through a lot of the same guilt. And obviously, we can't avoid, all the emotions that come with grief, but I want to try to mitigate any guilt that I might feel or regret. But also because I want to know, I want them to know, like we said, we don't know what's going to happen in our lives. We don't know, when someone might be taken away, when we might be taken away. And so I really want people to know how I feel every day, and to me, relationships are kind of the most important thing in life. It's like you can have all the money in the world, you can have all the, luxury in the world, but if you're not with the people that you care about, then, what are you really doing? And so, yeah, so I spend a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, but I spend enough time, I should say, really trying to, care for the people I care about. I'm going to keep talking because I can't tell if Dee is still here. I don't know. I think, I hope that people also learn how to ask for the support they need while they're grieving. Um, One of the hardest things for me was to figure out what I needed and also how and where to get it. Um, you know, there's all kinds of grief support out there, but I didn't know what they were. I didn't know what was the difference between them. Um, and I didn't know how to ask for help because I was supposed to be the strong one. I was the one um, to help my parents. I was the one to make all the phone calls on my sister's behalf and take care of her state and do all the things. And when it came time to, like, after all the phone calls were made and after all the arrangements were made, um, it was kind of, that's when the grief really started to hit. And I didn't have anything to do with my grief. I didn't know what to do with my grief, and I didn't know where to turn. And it felt really hard to ask for help from people who had not experienced what I experienced. And my friends were amazing. They absolutely tried, and some of them were, knew exactly, what to do, but a lot of people didn't. Um, and it was really hard to just figure out what I wanted, what I needed, what would help me. It took a long time to be able to, when I finally did know what I want, it took a lot of time to actually reach out and get help. Partially, I think, because I'm not always used to asking for help. I liked, especially back then, really liked to be independent and take care of myself. But also, you already feel so vulnerable. You already feel weak. You already feel like, life has sucker punched you, and then to have to go and ask for help, and maybe that person can give it to you, maybe they can't, maybe they'll say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, or maybe they'll, mean well, but they still say stuff that hurts. It's like you just don't want to open yourself up anymore. You don't want to be vulnerable. You're already so raw. Um, and so I do spend a lot of time trying to help people, like, figure out where to get help, how to get help, and understand the differences, between the different kinds of support. I actually create an assessment on my website about, like, take this assessment to understand where you are in your grief journey and what kind of support is best for you, whether it's a grief coach, a grief counselor, or a grief therapist. Because, like I said, I was in therapy for quite a while after my sister died, and again, she was a lovely therapist, but just it was not helpful. It wasn't what I needed. So I think it's important, as we also think about different kinds of losses and the different kinds of ways to get help. I think it's important to educate ourselves and understand there are differences in those different modalities, and to explore, experiment. There might be something completely outside of those three. It might be a support group. It might be like I went to see a shaman for a while. I did a lot of acupuncture. I tried Reiki. I tried some other things. So, you never know what could help you with your grief, but be willing to try different things and see what sticks, see what works for you. Um, and then Dee, I know we were talking earlier about, different cultures and what happens with different religions and sort of their traditions in grief. Um, and I can share, one of the things that I really appreciate about some of the major religions and how they deal with grief is the community aspect of it. Like in Judaism, it's sitting Shiva for a week. Islam has something similar, but it's for 3 days. And it's that idea of like, you don't leave the grieving alone, right? You don't just go home at the end of the funeral and you're sitting in your empty house. No, there are people there. There's family, there's relatives, there's neighbors, there's people you barely know, but they're there and they're there consistently for at least 3 days. And I think that's amazing. I think that's wonderful and something that we here in the States can really learn from, because we all need people, we all need help, especially when we're grieving, and to have that community and to feel it, I think is amazing.
Yeah, here in the States, we pretty much have the same thing where we afterwards someone go to whoever's home and then there's a meal and there's the but I've also noticed how sometimes people seem to really keep to themselves.
Mm.
Um, when my son passed away after the funeral, we didn't go to. Well, I live in Gainesville, Florida, and my son's funeral was in Orlando, so we had nowhere to go. So we ended up going to Olive Garden afterwards, as those who are close friends and family, and and let them do the cooking and and enjoy that. Um, but I know we're here in the States, we do the same thing. Um, but I think there was something else you said, and my mind just went blank on me what I was going to ask about it. I hate that when that happens. See, whatever you
Mm.
do, when you hit your 40s, it's bad. When you hit your 50s, it gets worse. When you hit your 60s, it gets even worse when your brain starts to forget words. Now, there's where the grief is, when you lose your memory. But there is, see, something come back to me now that I said that. Grief is not just the death of somebody. Grief is the loss also of relationships, divorces,
Mm.
moving, weddings, graduations, loss of a pet, you know, um, new school, new things. People don't realize that grief is not just death alone.
Mhm.
We define it as death alone because that's the way society teaches us.
Mhm.
But grief is beyond death. Although, when you come to think of it, if somebody's going through a divorce, there's the death of that relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I, but anyway, I was gonna say something else, and I'm like, no, that's not gonna work either. That's, but death is not grief is just not about death.
Yeah.
We go through all 43 different types of grief, on
Mhm.
plus, and
Mhm.
people just we live it and do it on a daily basis that we don't realize it's considered grief, you know,
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
do it on a daily basis. But when there was an actual loss of a loved one, then we sense it or we feel it, or
Yeah.
the overwhelming, like how you were bringing up, um, you went to you tried to go to grief therapy and try different methods to help you through your grief, And what may work for one may not work for another. I know I went to grief therapy, and it didn't work for me either because they were more concerned about my past than my grief. And at that time, I had just become a grief coach, and where I was going for grief therapy, the therapists were residents that were just about ready to get an MS or whatever, or the MS. And so I felt like I was teaching them about
Mm-hmm.
grief,
Mm-hmm.
because, and then they wanted me to pay a copay. And I'm like, I'm teaching you guys, and you want me to pay you guys. But anyway, it's funny how one of the reasons why I decided to become a grief coach, and you may also feel might also think of the same thing. I you Compassion Friends is a organization of parents who've lost children, and I've heard parents and grandparents in that group in this area that they too try to go to grief therapy and it didn't work for them, and it's like, why isn't grief therapy not working? It just beyond me. And that was one of the reasons why I became a grief coach. It's
Mm-hmm.
because I felt so bad for these parents who are trying to seek some kind of help, some kind of grasp, And there were siblings who lost siblings that were there too. And
Mm-hmm.
they too were trying to find that, hanging on to something. And
Yeah.
it's just beyond me why we don't really have enough grief therapists. Now, here at Global Grief Conference, I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
Global Grief Network, we do have quite a few people who are licensed social work, clinical social workers and therapists who have become grief therapists, but it was due to a loss in their own family that
Mm-hmm.
they had to experience in order to grasp that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we have to somehow find the love and support with each other to get, in a sense, to get that, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, that grief therapy, in a sense, to be that support for each other, to love each other, to pray with each other, to pray for each other, to not only to give comfort and hugs or to hold the hand or whatever, but to always be there for each other. And and the most important thing I wanted to say too, I teach this class, is learning how to become an effective comforter. Learning how to comfort each other. Because it's not a matter of just being there on the day of the funeral, but it's being there for the next few days, the next few weeks, the next few months, the next few years, even. And some people say, but they become uncomfortable without grief. I'm sorry you are uncomfortable without grief, but the importance of human contact, human love that we have, that God has given us to be there for each other, you know, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what culture or religion or society that we live in, it's learning to be there for and with each other,
Mm-hmm.
because that is where comfort comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus teaches us, blessed are those who mourn, for they should be comforted.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to be, God sends us. God sends me for you. God sends you for me to be that comfort for each other. That's how God comforts us. It's with each other. And it's learning to become that effective comforter as a human being for and with each other. That is so important.
So important. And I think that's one of the biggest things that most people lack, especially
Yes.
even after COVID, honestly, and even after all the tragedy, the grief, the loss, the deaths. I mean, we've been through so much over the last few years as a race. You know what I mean? But I think there's so many people who are so uncomfortable feeling or being sad, feeling grief. They don't know how to deal with it. They feel overwhelmed by it. I actually worked with somebody very recently who was like, sadness, grief is a weakness, and I don't want to. I can't show it. I can't fully participate in it, nor can I help other people through it. And I think it is that idea that somehow you're weak because you're grieving. Um, that it's hard, right? It's hard to be with, and it's hard to see people we love in pain. We don't want them to be in pain. We want to fix
Exactly.
it.
Yeah.
We're very much about, like, let's fix the problem and move on, right? Like, let's
Yeah.
just cross it off the list, get going, get back to quote unquote normal, right? And I think we have to recognize that, like, it's important to recognize weakness and grief are not the same, you know, um, and it's important to recognize that life will never go back to quote unquote normal. It's
Yeah.
grief is not something to just fix and cross off the list. And you're absolutely right. Like, we're here to comfort each other. We're here to help each other. I mean, what better gifts can you give somebody than your time and energy when they're at their
Yes.
lowest? You know,
Yes.
um, and so, yeah, so I mean, the fact that you teach a class on how to comfort is amazing. Like, hats off to you. I'm so glad that exists, and I want to send a lot of people your way.
Yeah.
um, but no, I mean, I think it is like absolutely critical, and so many of us, we isolate. We don't show how we feel. We don't show the extent of our grief. We don't share, how bad we're actually doing. And that's where, the how do I say it? It's like the stagnation comes in, right? That's where the stalling, that's where it can be hard to move. It can be hard to breathe. It can be hard to find ways to deal, healthily deal with the grief
Do you
because
think
we're all
that's
there.
because? Do you think that's because sometimes we have a hard time accepting the fact that this loved one has passed away, that they're no longer with us?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a combination of so many things.
Yes.
But yeah, and actually, I think sometimes getting help, people don't reach out for help because they don't want to accept what's happened.
Yes.
Right. I think a lot of people are like, no, I can't feel better. I can't work through this. I don't want this. So how could I
Yeah.
work through it? I can't get better and not feel bad or not grieve because
Yes.
that's dishonoring my person, or not remembering them or whatever it is. And
Hence, yeah.
yeah,
Hence, why many isolate themselves,
yeah,
because
yeah,
they're trying to shield themselves from. They want to get better, but they don't want to get better. Because if I
yeah.
get better, that means I'm accepting the fact that
Mm-hmm.
Shirley's never coming back again. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Exactly.
or or I mean, for me, I mean, it was easier for me to accept my son's death because I went through the um, anticipatory grief. I knew since he was 6 or 7 years old that the disease was going to eventually take his life. We
Mm-hmm.
just didn't know when, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so I knew that in time it was going to happen. But even when it did happen, still doesn't mean I didn't grieve. I did grieve.
Of course.
But the worst part is with me, I'm going to come right out and say this, is that I was left alone
Mm-hmm.
in my home. The day Timothy died, I was left alone. I mean, people from church came over and then they all left, and then I was all alone.
Yeah.
And I did end up sleeping in his bed um, because reality hit me that he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't coming back, you know, and that now I am alone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you had somebody in your life for 25 years and then boom, they're gone, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I And you would think that, you know, as many people as they were that even ended up attending the funeral a week later, that still somebody would have been there. And no,
Mm-hmm.
they were there for me at the funeral. Yes, that was great. But, I can't think of any of them that can really comprehend
Mm.
what it was like to lose a child.
Mm.
And unto this day, I still get 10 years later, and to this, oh, 9 years later, and to this day, I still get backlash, even from my siblings. Why
Mm.
are you still grieving? You need to move on. You need to stop this. Stop that feeling sorry for yourself and blah 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 blah. And it's like,
They don't get, you don't ever stop grieving.
and, and
Don't
I
ever stop.
said and I said to my one sister, and I mean, God forbid, and I said this to her, God forbid anything happens to your son, but
Mm.
you will never comprehend
Mm.
the loss of a child. It's an emotional thing that just does not go away. It doesn't,
Yeah.
you know? And but you'll never understand that because you still have your son that
Mm.
stands in front of you. You still have your granddaughter that lives with you. So you have all this. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't, you know? And
Yeah.
she just kept going and I just walked away because they don't understand
Mm.
the pain of a mother. So I know my pain as a mother-in-law is terrible, but I hope and pray that I never have to feel the pain of losing a sibling like you had to, or anyone else out there who's had to lose a brother or a sister.
Thank
Because, like you, part of me right now sort of feels a little bit of that guilt of wishing that our relationships were much
you.
better, you
Mm.
know, that we had a much tighter and much better relationship, and not
Mm.
this war with each other.
Mm.
And it doesn't help when there's one family member that keeps spreading rumors and lies and
Mm.
untruths. So that's one of the reasons why I keep my distance because I'm tired of the
Sure.
toxic relationships.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah. No,
at the
me.
same time, you're still my sister. You're still my
Mm.
brother,
Mm.
and I still love you.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And
even if you just send that message, just send a text message saying that I love you.
yes,
That's it. That's all you have to say. Sometimes that makes a difference. And I can't. Who knows what'll happen with you and your siblings in the future? I hope and pray also that things will get
you
better
hope it
in
lights a
time.
candle, right?
But
Light
yeah,
that fire like you and your sister.
yeah,
Because I think that's beautiful and wonderful that you and
thank
your sister realize, your older sister, or they
you.
were both your older sister. Okay. You and your sister realize how important your relationship meant to each other.
Yeah,
And that's what makes the relationship be like glue,
yeah, for
tight,
sure, for sure.
sealed, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
Because like we talked about earlier, there's no promises for tomorrow. So
Absolutely.
we need to close because I just looked at the clock and I'm sure you've been looking at the clock. And this is one of those conversations that is really, really hard to come to an end because it's really important. And maybe, Nesreen, we can have a part two on this kind of a conversation. Because you
Anytime.
know what we should do is that we should do part two is when adult children grieve. So
Anytime.
that's
Absolutely.
really important that not just small children, but we need to recognize adult siblings and children when they grieve as well.
Absolutely.
So um, I will get this posted on YouTube as soon as I do some little editing and tweaking. But meanwhile, everybody else,
Mm.
Nesreen, your website is harborlightscoaching.com.
Harbor Light Coaching. Yep.
Yeah.
.com.
And you can probably, if you would like to be able to get in touch with Nazreen and or learn some more, because I'm sure she has a lot of resources. You're in New York City?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So you know that she's going to have a lot of resources for those New Yorkers up there. I'm from New York City, believe it or not. Um,
Okay.
I, honey, you won't catch me dead in New York City.
Fair enough.
When I
Fair
left,
enough.
I left. But I'm
Hmm.
glad that you are a resource there in New York. That we have somebody there in that city that can help the many that is going through this. No matter what type of grief you're going through, Nazreen is there for you. You can contact her through HarborLightCoaching.com, and she will be glad to assist you. This is D Bird with Unplugged Grief Ministries podcast, and for those of you who missed being part of it because we're a little bit earlier today, I will still post this at 7 o'clock. So those who missed it at 3 can come back. And we will come back as part two, hopefully this fall. And we're going to, let's try to get together and do when adult children grieve, because I think that gets missed a lot
Yeah.
because there's so much focus on the little children. They
Yeah.
forget that the adult children also has to go through this. So
Sounds
Nazreen,
good.
thank you so much for
All
being
right.
part of this. I look forward
Thank
to
you,
speaking
T.
with you again. And everybody else, have a wonderful weekend. Until the next time, God
Take care.
bless.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. She had